So first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. I know everyone else is presenting and you have other options. So I truly appreciate everyone coming to this session. This is a part of my dissertation that I will share with you today. And and it's called A Literature Review of Jehovah's Witnesses College Students' Experience with Secular Higher Education. All right, just a little bit about me, my story. Okay, so I've never been a Jehovah's Witnesses, just so that you understand. Although my spouse is a college-educated Jehovah's Witnesses member, she's been for the last 10 years. I mean, we've been married for 10 years. Her entire life, she's been a Jehovah's Witnesses. I also have immediate family members who are Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, I am a doctoral student at Florida Atlantic University. I'm on my 5th year. I'm also a home scholar at Florida Atlantic University, and I'm a higher education employee. I focus on philanthropy and raising money for universities and professional development. And I'm a husband and I'm a father to 2 boys. All right, so with that said, here's a brief overview of what I will be sharing with you today so that you can get an idea. I'll start out with a brief video. If you can see that you can see a young lady and her experience and what she's gone through. There was a challenge. It was based from the Chronicles of Higher Education, February of 24. And we'll see what she said. It's entitled I Knew the Repercussions of Leaving. A student gave up one life to pursue another. So let's watch the video and see what she has to say here.
During the time that I was thinking about going to college, I was also experiencing other internal conflicts when it came to the religious organization that I grew up in. And the reason for that is because I felt that the values and interests that I had in my life did not match the other members that were in the organization, and I did not see anybody around me as role models for what I wanted to do with my life. The requirements and expectations of the religion I felt steered me away from the things I wanted to do in my life. And so that's why I ultimately made the decision to leave the religion in order to have the freedom to pursue the goals and the dreams that I wanted. Even though it was hard, even though it was confusing and scary, it was very, very scary and painful because I knew the repercussions of leaving, and I still made the decision that I had to go. Okay, sorry. I wasn't expecting that. My family, my community, everybody I grew up with, I knew I would lose them in some way, and probably in a big way, and so that was a sacrifice I struggled with. And I struggled with it for a few years. I mean, I started to think about things when I was 16 and ultimately left when I was 18. And so it was a couple of years there that there was.
All right, but I just want to give you the gist. I mean, there's a little bit more to the video, but currently, just to give you some update on Lori, she's studying molecular, cellular, and developmental biology at Yale University. So she's overcome what she's gone through. So I can share that with you. So now let's give you some definitions, because the Watchtower Society and Jehovah's Witnesses throughout will be interchangeable. So whenever I say one, it means the other. So they are a proclaimed Christian organization with unique dogmas. Okay, I think everyone knows that. It is essential to note that the Watchtower Society is a legal entity that represents the Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay. Basically, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they communicate with its members through four primary sources of research, primary sources. The first is the New World Living Translation Bible version. Okay, I refer to it as their holy book because it's really not a Bible. Okay, and I want to point out that Ray France, in his book 20 years ago, Crisis of Conscience, okay, he basically lists the government body members. There were 5 of them who actually translated the Bible. One being Nathan Knorr, Albert Schroeder, George Gangas, Ray's uncle, a guy named Fred France, and Ray France. And very interestingly about this, only one of them, Ray France, had any sort of college experience. All the rest of them just had high school experience. The others going on is the second is their website. Jehovah's Witnesses use their website, jw.org. And third and fourth is the Awake and the Watchtower. The Awake is a quarterly magazine, and the Watchtower is their monthly publications. Okay. A little bit of background I just wanted to share so that everyone can understand that they were founded, the religion. First of all, let me just back up and just to give you some context with it. Religion and higher education are tightly intertwined in the United States. And my research really focused within the United States, not necessarily out, but it can, correlate to both, okay? So, and in fact, when you think about the 17th century, the primary purpose of higher education institution was to prepare ministers, okay? And so that's where, so now a little bit of background about the Jehovah's Witnesses, okay? So the organization was founded in Allegheny, Pennsylvania in 1879 by Charles Taze Russell. Today, they're current members of about 8.7 million members worldwide, with about 1.2 million within the United States, okay? The name Jehovah's Witnesses was introduced by their second president, Joseph Rutherford, in 1931. They have very unorthodox practices as well as distinct dogmas. One of the practices are door to door, and they have distinct dogmas, a lot of which I will get into later. And then lastly, right, in terms of education, because that's kind of my focus, going from K through 12 to education, to higher education, just to kind of see how they prefer homeschool as opposed to regular secular higher education. And because my study focuses on JWs and secular higher education, the Watchtower Society discourages pursuing higher education. They deem it unnecessary. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of the purpose of my research, right? My entire dissertation is a phenomenological study that explores how Jehovah's Witnesses college students make meaning of their academic, social, and spiritual engagement while enrolled in secular higher education. It is a qualitative study, okay? And that means that I'll be using interviews as well as document analysis to kind of come to my conclusion. Significance, there are 2 groups, okay? First, it will help Jehovah's Witnesses college students, help them to sort of let them be aware of campus's resource. I think that's very critical. The second thing, it can effectively manage and balance their college along with what they're being taught by the Jehovah's Witnesses. The second group is college administrators, because right now it seems like they don't understand, right, what's going on with this group of people because they're not out, recruiting Jehovah's Witnesses, right? So hopefully my study will raise awareness of Jehovah's Witnesses college students and educate the campus community about the unique challenges, okay, and contributions Jehovah's Witnesses college students have to offer. And then finally, I hope it will offer supportive programs and policies for Jehovah's Witnesses college students, okay? There are 3 research questions that drive my research. Number 1 is really sort of looking at how do Jehovah's Witnesses students resolve what they're learning from secular higher education and what they're learning from the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Number 2 is really the affiliation between, the effects of their academic, social, and their spiritual growth as they're going through their journey through higher education. And lastly is strategically, right? What are they implementing so that they can manage, right, their academic, their social, as well as their spiritual? Okay, this right here, right, is the author's category, and I've broken them out into 3 sections. So when you think about it, right, so the first column on the left, right, that's the Watchtower produced literature, okay, and this is non-peer review literature, right? This is, you know, whatever Jehovah's Witnesses want, you know, their doctrine, what they're teaching. None of this stuff is peer reviewed. Is what they say goes, right? The second column is self-published writings by former Jehovah's Witnesses members. And some of it does have some agenda. And you can see, you know, again, these include books, articles, memoirs from former Jehovah's Witnesses. And the third column, that's basically, right, these are have been conducted research by non-Jehovah's Witnesses. These are now your scholars, right? And so when you look at your scholars, right, and I want to point your attention to the highlighted ones in red, right? They're scholars now, but they were former Jehovah's Witnesses members, right, who have gone through and done academic research, okay? Like, for example, Rolf Ferlini, he has been a member for 56 years, right? And I also want to give a nice little plug, shout out right now to Wendy Grinadell and her team, right? Because their study worked on Jehovah's Witnesses, this fellowship, and that continues to inspire me to this day. So I just want to say thank you. With that, so now the literature review, my literature review has been broken down into 6 different sections, okay? As you can see, those are the first 3, and then we'll walk into, because I'm running out of time, so then I'll walk into them, you know, later on. But again, I want to point out in the right-hand column, the highlighted, right, so LaShonda Anderson, well, that was a dissertation. And so her dissertation, it explored the experiences of committed Seventh-day Adventist college students who attended secular higher education, right? And unlike the Watchtower Society's teaching on higher education, right, Anthony found that many Seventh-day Adventist students view higher education as an opportunity to learn and explore their faith spiritually in a new and different context, right? Unlike Jehovah's Witnesses, right? They don't want you to get it. So I found that to be very, very interesting. All right, these are now the last 3 subsections, right? And we know that many scholars and former Jehovah's Witnesses, you know, classified the Jehovah's Witnesses as a cult, okay? So Bonnie Zeman, who I've highlighted here, you know, in her memoir, Fading Out of JW, she classified them as a cult, right? And so that leads me to say, right, a portion of my dissertation will look at, right, is this organization a cult, right? And that's for us to decide and talk, right? A second part, right, condition and programming and mind control techniques, right? A lot of you, if people were in on our Russell Branshaw's talk yesterday, which I thought you did a great job, right? You talked about that and you mentioned Robert Cialdini, right? You talked about him and he explored the concept of influence and how people can be manipulated in various ways. He discussed the potential negative consequences of manipulation, including the loss of autonomy and critical thinking skills, particularly among college students, okay? And then last but not least, since my conceptual framework does use Marsha Baxter McGold's self-authorship theory, I did include a section, you know, that's very similar, you know, in my dissertation to what others use, whether it be their conceptual or theoretical framework. All right, so let's go dive deep into the Jehovah's Witness. Yeah.
You just back up because Steve Hassan is sitting here too. He's one of the red.
Huh? Oh, I didn't get to him, Russ. Relax. Don't jump ahead. I know. I didn't. Trust me. I didn't get to it. All right, so let's look at the early Jehovah's Witnesses, right? The leadership. Charles Taze Russell. We talked about this, right? 1879. So here's what Barbara Harrison had to say about him, right? This guy was money mad, power mad, and sex mad, right? He went through a divorce, right? During his divorce, he transferred all his assets, right, to declare himself penniless. So when he went to court, that's how he was able to relocate the organization from Pennsylvania to New York, okay? All right, now Joseph Rutherford, right? This guy was very interesting. So he was the second leader who actually took over, right? And to this day, we all know that Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe in government and politics and so on and so forth. Well, why? Well, this guy was in prison, right? So the fact that he was in prison, right, made him anti-government. So that's where that will stem from. And you'll see these are some of the other leaders, right? Michael Penton, he talked a great deal about Nor Gruss, and I won't, again, I'm pressed for time, so I'm kind of going through them fast, okay? And then as we know, Presidus, in 1976, they talked about it was an all-male governing body that came into play, and that's sort of what runs the organization today. All right, so let's look at their dogma, right? So we know, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, right, we know what a dogma means because it says it there, right? A fixed, especially religious belief or set of beliefs that people are expected, right, to accept without doubts. And we know you can't basically challenge the Watchtower Society, right? This is what it comes down to. This is what they say, right? And then you look at the Christian author Ron Rhodes. I'm quite sure some of you guys are familiar. And Ron Rhodes, what he did with his study, he engaged in conversations with Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Because he wanted to understand their beliefs and address their concerns. And this was through respectful dialogue. He had conversations with them, right? And he discovered, right, that what they believe is that the organization is the mouthpiece of God. So there's no disputing with that, okay? And this is what they believe. Okay, we know about their denial of the Trinity. And again, for sake of time, I'm kind of going through this one really fast, okay? Denial of Trinity. They also don't believe in salvation, right? We know about the whole heresy. You have to work, to get to heaven. That's what they believe in, okay? Keith Casanora, this guy spent 50 years of his life, pretty much lost everything. I had a conversation with him. Very fascinating young man. Everlasting punishment, which is also something that they believe in, right? Holidays, we know that they don't believe in any holidays whatsoever, except I should point out here, they do believe in anniversary. They do talk quite a bit about wedding anniversaries, and they believe that. And blood transfusion, we all know that they don't believe in that. And I guess the main scholar on that is a guy named Osuna Morimoto. He does a lot on Jehovah's Witnesses and the blood and what they believe and so on and so forth. All right, so let's dive into what I believe, right, is K through 12 education. We know, right, that it's mandatory in the United States, and the Watchtower strongly, right, emphasizes spiritual education over secular education, okay? And so in a Watchtower, this Watchtower article from 2019, right, entitled School Problems Today, they discuss increasing intensity of social problems in schools throughout the years. The article provided an example of a K through 12 school in the United States where students sleep in class, threaten each other in graffiti-covered hallways, and belittle high-achieving students, right? The article goes on to quote the New York Times without citations at all. So they just quote them, right? Which reported on issues such as students dealing with responsibilities like caring for babies, having incarcerated parents, right? And surviving gang violence. All this they're quoting the New York Times, okay? So I found that to be very, very interesting, okay? Then you go through Walter Martin, he does quite a lot, and he talks about it. It's all to please Jehovah. That's Jehovah's Witnesses. Everything that they do is pleasing to Jehovah. And then Barbara Anderson, I don't know if anyone read any of her stuff, she was a member for many, many years, worked in Bethel, and, students were constantly, warned about potential drawbacks of higher college education. All right, now here's another short little video. Now this is what their Jehovah's Witnesses beliefs are about higher education. This was a talk given in May 2005 by one of the government body members.
Frequentare l'università citando l'esempio di figli di anziani che stanno o hanno frequentato l'università. Noi non possiamo e non vogliamo dirvi cosa fare. Voi e i vostri genitori dovete prendere la decisione. Noi non siamo i signori sulla vostra fede. Comunque lo schiavo fedele e discreto è responsabile di mettere in guardia contro i pericoli spirituali e di incoraggiare a mettere gli interessi del regno al primo posto. Quindi lo schiavo scoraggia a frequentare l'università per un lungo periodo di tempo. Ripetutamente ho sentito di esperienze di individui che stavano per completare gli studi presso un'università quando poi hanno smesso perché hanno preso la verità. Altri individui battezzati hanno rifiutato borse di studio. Voi cosa farete? Quale decisione prenderete? Rifiuterete o meno? Perseguirete l'istruzione universitaria o no? Dovrete rispondere a Jehovah. Vogliamo lodare tutti coloro nell'uditorio che hanno smesso di frequentare l'università quando sono venuti nella verità e tutti coloro che dopo aver ascoltato questo discorso faranno la stessa cosa. Forse volete ancora giustificare andare all'università. Forse dite, vedi, il fratello tal dei tali ha frequentato l'università e adesso serve nella congregazione ed è anche pioniere. È vero, può essere che abbia sopravvissuto l'università, si può dire, ma quanto segue è una vera esperienza riguardo un giovane che soffriva di un disturbo compulsivo che gli causava di lavarsi continuamente le mani, persino 100 volte al giorno. Questo disturbo lo scoraggiò così tanto che un giorno decise di suicidarsi. Comprò un fucile, lo puntò alla sua bocca e premette il grilletto. La pallottola però non lo uccise, ma invece forò la parte del cervello che era responsabile per il suo comportamento compulsivo. Sopravvisse e dopo ciò riuscì a vivere una vita normale. Sì, è vero, sopravvisse.
So you get the gist, right? So notice how the video they praised, right, those who dropped out of college, right, and then they equate higher education with death. I mean, that's pretty blatant, right? That is pretty blatant, right? And so we know that they've produced lots of articles, right, that talks about they want their members to refrain from pursuing higher education. And here's an awake from 1994, right? All of Jehovah's Witnesses, regardless of their educational status, have something in common, right? They recognize that the most important education available today has its source in God's word, the Bible, right? So this is what they say. But earlier, remember I mentioned Bonnie Zeman? So here's what Bonnie Zeman had to say about her experience, right? Right, there is this is what she was told, right? There's absolutely no need for a young witness to think about furthering their education at university. We were told there are so many bad influences in a university, my Lou, that could pull us away from the truth, right? Pull us away from the truth. The government body is afraid that you might learn something that could liberate your mind. And worst of all, you might acquire some critical thinking skills that could help you break their spell of control. The government body maintains control over their adherents by keeping them from gaining any sense of personal competency or power via an education, satisfying career, or the attainment of professional and financial success. So you see, that's pretty deep, right? And let's go and see what some others have to say, okay? So we know these are many other former Jehovah's Witnesses like Sora and the Bodings. They believe that the Watchtown Society discourages higher education to keep its followers, keep them isolated and less likely to question the teaching, right? This guy is very interesting, Neil Gardner, right? 25-year member. Here's what he has to say why he wrote his book, right? The reason I wrote this booklet is to help deal with what I see as a real problem among ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. So many of us leave the cult totally unprepared for what we'll face. We are usually thrown outside into a world that we were taught to fear, hate, even told to make it work or come back on bended knees. Okay, let's see what David Reed had to say. Okay, right. Awaken and Watchtower magazines misrepresents higher education, portraying it as a satanic snare or deceptive trap to avoid. The What Society highlights the potential risks and challenges of pursuing secular higher education degree, including exposure to diverse ideas, alternative beliefs, systems, and potential conflicts regarding moral and spirituality. Okay, let's take a look again at their publications, right? This is from a Watchtower, 1989. As you can tell, the guy, in the blue shirt there, right? He's probably debating, should I go to college? Should I not? And I'm just speculating, this guy is probably an elder, right? The other guy, and the elder is telling him, hey, I don't think you should. This is what can happen, so on and so forth. So you can just kind of see, and there's a quote, this quote here, university and college campuses are notorious for bad behavior, right? Drug and alcohol abuse, immorality, cheating, hazing, and the list goes on. This is what they believe. And you can see over there on this side, there's a lot of other text there straight from them, someone dares you to smoke a cigarette, so all kinds of things like that. And then finally at the end there, Ben Cuddy, which is a scholar, he points out that pursuing higher education for most Jehovah's Witnesses can lead to discipline and a punishment for them. All right, we're doing good on time, guys. Let's get to it. All right. So these are some of the challenges that Jehovah's Witnesses students face, right? One is social isolation, right? I'll go through this really fast. Two is disfellowship and shunning. Again, Wendy Grenadell and her team, they do amazing work on this. So most of my stuff came from there. Mental health is a big problem, and I'll discuss that in the next slide. And I want to give a little shout out here to Ken Garrett, who's not here. He's a former member of a high control religious group. And he talks about the pastor's abusive power and how that power have over you, okay? Time constraints, it just gets the Jehovah's Witnesses completely conflicted. Which one to do, they don't know. And then the conflict in beliefs, which leads to cognitive dissonance. And again, I'll skip through those really fast. But I do want to touch up on the mental health, because Bonnie, Barbara Anderson, she said some really good stuff here. And, the general public needs to be aware of the high number of suicides among born and Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly during their teenage years and young adulthood. Children growing up in this highly controlled, better than everyone else culture, having a difficult time going it alone in a world they've been taught to fear and despise. And so you can see how tough that is. And then this is Anthony James oops, let me go back in his book, what he says. Many witnesses also suffer from depression and other mental disorders. That's just the gist of it, you can see, right? So, all right, I'm just going to skip through really fast, go through some critical thinking. The late Charles Branson, what he had to say about Jehovah's Witnesses, provide members with a sense of community, of belonging, and that's what's the attraction, that would keep them in the group. Eric Schaefer, who talks about the anti-education. Johnny Nolan talks about blind obedience, they just follow it. Most Jehovah's Witnesses don't. No, and then is Jehovah's Witnesses a cult? That's the definition of a cult, basically. You can see. And again, I'm going through this fast for a little time because I do want to open it up to some Q&A if we do have some Q&A. Okay. They're labeled a destructive cult, theoretical cult, intellectually deceptive cult, fundamentalistic cult, right? And this quote, I just had to stop and pause here because it's very interesting. So Brenda Lee, who's having a conversation with her father's a non-Jehovah's Witness, the mother is a Jehovah's Witnesses, and she said, Dad, if the Jehovah's Witnesses told mother to murder the entire family, like Jim Jones' cult did, and twisted some scriptures to justify that it was the right thing to do, she would have killed us all in an instant. I mean, so that's gotta hit home. That's some tough stuff. Okay, now let's talk about conditioning and programming and mind control, okay? Again, they're deceptive practices that they use. Diane Wilson talks a great deal about that. Okay, Hines, he talks about the false interpretations of their doctrine. Right, Cianaldi, who I mentioned earlier, okay, consequences of manipulation. Okay, Michael Langornia, I think everyone here is familiar with him. He was a former member here, very active in there, did, quite a lot of work on this stuff. And then that's another quote there, the nature of the Watchtower religion is that you cannot express serious doubts or question, right, without fear of being labeled a troublemaker or weak in the faith. The result of vocalizing doubts or questioning the leadership, right, wisdom or evident, people drift away from you whilst labeling you a bad associate, independent thinker, or even something severe as a wolf in sheep's clothing, or apostate, which is the ultimate sin and evil as far as the witnesses are concerned. Okay, now Russ, you want to go ahead and take it away? This is my shameless plug. Dr. Hassan, as far as I'm concerned, is the modern day authority on cults. I mean, I would highly recommend that you go to his website, Freedom of Mind here. These are a few of his books. I mean, he's given books, articles on this stuff, and it has really inspired me. So I thank you. Continue to do your work because it means a great deal to all of us. And one of the things I want to point out, one of the quotes that he said in this article here, brainwashing, young people into violent extremist group. I mean, we all know about it, right? He coined the bite model. I don't have time to go into each of it, but you can just imagine if someone controls your behavior, you can't associate with someone who's wearing white, okay? Your information you're telling, you can only read our information. You can't read anything else, okay? They're controlling how you think. You have to think as a group collectively. And they're controlling your emotions, how you feel. And so that's sort of what the concept of the entire bite model is. And this, according to their 2008 article, this is what they say. Jehovah's Witnesses teaches its members that Jehovah's beaming eyes are constantly watching you, right? So that creates that fear and just keeps you captivated, okay? And last, again, this is my conceptual framework that I used. And these are the stages that you can go through that will help someone kind of, get through this. These are just some additional resources that you can have. The top ones are all former Jehovah's Witnesses. The bottom are some other, scholarly authors that you can read at your leisures. And then these are just some quotes. And since I do have a quick second, I just want to read this. So if you look at this quotes very careful, right? Look at all the highlighted in red, right? And I took all the highlighted in red, right? And I put it into, just want to share this with you because I find it interesting. I don't know if you guys will, but I put it into ChatGPT to see what it would come up with. But this is what it spilled out for me, and I'll read it for you. Growing up, becoming a baptized Jehovah's Witnesses at 12 or 13 was the norm, yet it felt like signing up for a life sentence of obedience to the Watchtower's often questionable predictions. This completely authoritarian organization expects members to be good witnesses and obey without question, isolating them from the outside world. Their false doctrine, coupled with extremely manipulative and abusive tactics, makes it tough to break free. Despite their serious mistakes, including disapproval or higher education, many find themselves significantly happier after leaving this restrictive community. So that you got that from all of these in red here. So I find that very interesting. So that's the end of my talk. That's my contact information. That's it.